Hey everyone! Welcome to Social Studies with Miss Rogers, World History Edition. Today we're going to continue with our world religions and we're going to focus on Buddhism. There are some who might argue that Buddhism is more of a philosophy than a religion, but that's something I want you to decide for yourself. So let's go ahead and get started. Yes, it is true that chronologically, Judaism does come after Hinduism. But I like to teach Buddhism right after Hinduism because they're connected. And what I mean by connected is that not only do the two religions share some similar ideas, but the founder of Buddhism actually grew up in a Hindu household. This founder's name was Siddhartha Gautama, and the story of his life really is the story of how Buddhism was created. Pause for a second because I do want to address something. I take correct pronunciations pretty seriously, and I've agonized over Gautama and Gautama. I went to a practicing Buddhist and asked specifically, what do they say at their temple? And she said personally, her temple uses Gautama. So that is what I'm going with, and that is why I am using that pronunciation. A lot of times, the life of Siddhartha is referred to as a legend. And the thing about legends is that sometimes different parts of the world tell them a little bit differently. So with that being said, this is one of the versions of the story of Siddhartha Gautama. Our story takes place around the 6th century BCE in an area that today we call Nepal. This is directly north of India, right by the mountains, so most people around here practice Hinduism, and this includes the Gautama clan of the area. This clan had a Raja, or a king-like figure, and his name was Suddhodana. Suddhodana and his wife Maya were so thrilled because they were expecting a baby boy soon. When the Gautama baby was born, he was given the name Siddhartha. Unfortunately, though, Maya died soon after giving birth to her son, and the Raja got remarried to Maya's sister. To make this birth even more eventful than it already was, it was predicted that Siddhartha could become a great king, maybe even the best that's ever been. However, if he ever saw the sights of human misery, he would grow up to be a religious leader instead. Naturally, like most kings, the Raja desperately wanted his son Siddhartha to follow in his royal footsteps, and he was determined to ensure that Siddhartha never witnessed the sights of human misery. The Raja did this by placing Siddhartha on house arrest for most of his life. I know what you're thinking, geez, that sounds terrible, but when you're a royal and have a palace full of all the toys and food and girls that you could ever want, can't be that bad, right? The whole goal was for the young prince to constantly be around symbols of youth, beauty, and health. When Siddhartha turned 19, he was married to his beautiful cousin, and they had a sweet baby boy named Rahula. Siddhartha was very happy for now. However, as he got older, he became increasingly unsatisfied with his life. It's said that as Siddhartha neared his 30th birthday, he gradually became aware of the ugliness of the world. Fun fact, in Hindu versions of this legend, they say that Hindu gods saw the future Buddha living such a wasteful life, and they conspired together to wake him from this sort of fantasy world. They really wanted him to start his real journey. Siddhartha felt like he was missing something in his life, so he decided to sneak out of the palace. On this journey, one by one, he ended up seeing a wrinkled and bent elderly person, a diseased man, and a rotting corpse. And he was absolutely mortified by these sights because he had no idea that this kind of pain and misery existed in the world. Siddhartha then realized that not only were those fates super common in the world, but they would even happen to him one day. At the end of his journey out of the palace, he saw a tranquil monk who renounced the regular world in search of inner peace. At this point, Siddhartha was definitely aware that suffering existed in the world, and he was so overwhelmed that he ran home. It's said that as soon as he got back to the palace and was greeted by all of the women there to keep him company, upon seeing them, he started having visions of them becoming old and sick and dying. Siddhartha then started panicking and he locked himself away in his room. Siddhartha decided he could not stay in that palace, and he desperately wanted to find the meaning of life among all of this suffering he witnessed. So he told his family bye and he left in the middle of the night. Siddhartha thought that he should no longer be tied to all of the luxuries he was pampered with growing up. He found a beggar and asked him to trade clothes with him. He also cut off his hair and got rid of his horse. Siddhartha was determined to find the meaning of life, and he tried to do so in many ways. First, he tried philosophy, and eventually he even went as far as severe asceticism. That means Siddhartha deliberately sought out unpleasantness and pain, such as sitting on thorns, allowing vermin to get at his skin, even starving himself to the point of eating only a grain of rice every day for a given period of time. One day, Siddhartha even got to the point where he almost died, and it was that instant he decided that this clearly was not the way to finding the meaning of life or enlightenment. He picked himself up, found himself a real meal, and decided it was time to meditate. He told himself he was going to sit and meditate until he found the meaning of life, until he found enlightenment, and one day, it finally came. Siddhartha finally found enlightenment, and since that day, he was known as Buddha, or Enlightened One. The Buddha became enlightened when he was about 35 years old, and he spent the rest of his life teaching his growing band of disciples. Many Westerners tend to think of Buddha as this plump, jolly man because of Chinese statues found in restaurants and stores. However, these figures are not meant to reflect the actual Gautama Buddha. Remember, Siddhartha was an ascetic who at one point only ate 1 grain of rice per day. It was said he got so thin that when he touched his stomach, he could feel his backbone. Buddhists believe that anyone who reaches enlightenment or nirvana during their lifetime earns the title Buddha. So that means Gautama was not the only person referred to as Buddha in Buddhist history. He was just the first and the original. The laughing Buddha depicted in those statues is actually a Chinese monk who lived over 1,000 years ago. I think we're actually going to save other Buddhas and the idea of avatars in Buddhism for world religions. I really want to focus mostly on Siddhartha Gautama for this class. In some ways, Siddhartha Gautama's ideas could be seen as an attempt to reform Hinduism. It isn't really known whether or not Siddhartha actually intended to create a new religion or doctrine or philosophy. In some ways, his ideas could really be seen as an attempt to reform Hinduism. In Siddhartha's day, Hinduism had become super complex. Society was very dependent on Brahmins and saw them as keepers of society and religious secrets. Siddhartha often criticized this way of life. He often said, "Don't just go with what the Brahmins say is true. Learn for yourself what is good and bad. Decide for yourself based off of your own knowledge." Siddhartha accepted some ideas of Hinduism, such as reincarnation and karma, but Siddhartha very strongly disagreed with the caste system. He taught that all people could reach nirvana, regardless of their social class in life, and this made Buddhism super appealing to lower caste members. Siddhartha also hated the idea of worshipping all the various gods and goddesses in Hinduism, and he forbade his followers from worshipping anything. He was asked throughout his life if he was a god, and he said, "No, I'm not." He was asked if he was a sort of angel or saint, and he said, "No, I'm not. I am simply awake." He said that he never wanted to be worshipped in his life or even in death, and for that reason, Buddhism is sometimes argued to be more of a philosophy than a religion. Now, this idea of no worshipping is a general idea in Buddhism. Now, are there some types of Buddhism that practice differently? Yes, but we're not going to get into all the different types of Buddhism until we get to World Religions class. We're just going to focus on general Buddhist ideals for now. Fun fact, in the Hindu religion, it was assumed that Buddha, or Gautama, was a reincarnation of Vishnu, or one of Vishnu's avatars. As soon as Siddhartha reached enlightenment or nirvana, he preached a message to his followers that would be called the Four Noble Truths. These 4 truths are that 1, all life is suffering. 2, desire is the cause of that suffering. 3, to end your suffering, you must destroy all desire. And 4, to destroy your desire, you must follow the middle way. The middle way, or the middle path, is also known as the Eightfold Path because it consists of 8 steps. Siddhartha preached against the material world. He believed that physical things you can own are simply illusions. Siddhartha preached that the miseries of the world, such as pain and poverty and sorrow, are caused by people's attachment to physical objects, and that once people let go of their worldly desires, things such as pain and sorrow would be forgotten. After letting go of such worldly things should come bodhi, or wisdom. The word bodhi is the root word of Buddhism, and achieving wisdom is the key step to achieving nirvana. How I better explain it to students is that you have to let go of all material things, and the only things that you really have are things you need to survive. There's always one student that thinks he's found the way around Buddhism, and asks if you can compromise by eating your favorite foods. No. If you're eating something because it tastes good, not because you need it to just fuel your body, you are still holding on to desire. To go about it the right way, you need to be at the point where you're just eating to fuel your body, whether you get a hold of tofu, steak, anchovies, tacos, it doesn't matter because the point is fueling your body, not looking for something that tastes good. We're going to clarify something for a second. These are general ideas that Buddhism preaches. Does that mean that every single Buddhist does it this way? No. It's just like any religion, such as Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Not every single person who practices does every single thing exactly by the religious book. Whether you don't go to church every Sunday, whether you don't keep kosher, whether you like to eat meat. Just because you don't follow all of the written down rules in your sacred text doesn't mean that you're any less a part of that religion. That is your business, and no one else can tell you that you are more or less a part of a religion because of which traditions you keep or don't keep. It's none of their business. Buddhists do all of this in order to reach Nirvana, which is a term I've used quite a bit lately, so I want to really explain what it is. Nirvana is ultimate enlightenment. However, Nirvana in Buddhism and moksha in Hinduism are different. In Hinduism, when you reach moksha, you are completing your cycle of reincarnation, and you're trading your human soul or your Atman for your morally perfect soul to be united and live on eternally with Brahman. Nirvana means extinguishing. Attaining nirvana or reaching enlightenment means that you are extinguishing the three fires of greed, delusion, and hatred from your soul. Someone who reaches nirvana does not immediately disappear into a heavenly realm. Nirvana is better understood as a state of mind that humans can reach. It's a state of spiritual joy with no negative emotions or fears. Someone who's attained nirvana is filled with compassion for all living things. After death, an enlightened person is said to be liberated from the cycle of rebirth, but Buddhism doesn't really give answers to what happens next. Buddha Gautama discouraged his followers from asking too many questions about nirvana and even the afterlife. He wanted them to concentrate on the task at hand, which is freeing themselves from the cycle of suffering. To Buddha, working towards an enjoyable afterlife would still give followers a materialistic desire, so they don't really talk about it. Because the goal of Buddhism is to get rid of desires altogether, followers are expected to refrain from harmful behaviors, such as these, the 5 precepts. We've talked about how not everyone follows 100% of the rules of a given religion, and the 5 precepts are not necessarily an exception to the rule. However, there is an exception to the rule if you take your vows as a Buddhist. It's expected that if you take your vows, you must refrain from the 5 precepts. It's a requirement. You can find all of this history of Buddhism and information about practices in what's considered the sacred book of Buddhism, the Pali Canon, or also known as the Tripitaka. The Pali Canon is considered to be a record of the words of Buddha himself, and it was written down in the 1st century CE. Tripitaka translates directly to 3 baskets, and it's named as such for its 3 sections. First, you have the Vinaya Pitaka. The Vinaya Pitaka contains rules telling monks and nuns how to behave within society, and a summary of these rules are chanted on a regular basis to remind them of these responsibilities. Next, you have the Sutta Pitaka. The Sutta Pitaka contains all of Buddha's teachings, and they're mainly recorded as sermons. This section also includes something called the Dhammapada. The Dhammapada means the path or verses of truth, and it's the best known of all Buddhist scriptures in the West. Finally, we have the Abhidharma Pitaka. This section is the most complex, and it contains teachings about the nature of life and reasons for being. When Buddhism originally developed, rulers in India were very interested in spreading their religion, and they created something called missionaries. These missionaries were sent to neighboring Asian nations and told to spread the culture. The thing is, though, that as Buddhism was starting to grow in popularity in Eastern Asia, it was losing popularity in India. And that's why today, most people who practice Buddhism are in Eastern Asia. Today, those Buddhists observe multiple holidays. Buddha's birthday, for example, is actually celebrated a few different ways depending on where in Asia you are. For example, in Japan, they celebrate Buddha's birthday on April 8th, and they have a huge flower festival. Another really neat holiday is the Festival of Souls, or Alambana. During July in Japan and August in China, Buddhists believe that the doors of purgatory are open, and that the souls of the dead are free to walk around. Family will leave gifts like food for these wandering souls, and elaborate rituals are performed by priests to offer comfort to the souls of the dead. It's clearly a very hospitable culture. There are a few different holidays celebrated by different types of Buddhists, but again, we're going to save that for a world religions class. That's it for the basics of Buddhism, and next we're going to tackle Judaism. We're actually going to travel back in time and start our journey in Mesopotamia. I'm so excited to talk about another culture with you guys, so I will see you then. See you later.